Welcome back to The Critique. Today, we're looking at material about Yad Vashem's major announcement, documenting 5 million names of Holocaust victims. Let's dive straight into the analysis.
Yeah, this is really powerful stuff. I mean, the subject itself, hitting 5 million names, it's got huge historical weight.
Absolutely.
Our task really is just making sure the way it's presented gives it the maximum impact it deserves.
Okay, so looking through it, a big theme seems to be, celebrating reaching that 5 million mark. That's over 80% of the estimated victims, which is, it's incredible.
It is incredible. Monumental success, clearly laid out. But I do wonder if focusing so much on that success, if it might actually sort of overshadow the tougher part of the story, the really difficult historical narrative. The material needs to deepen the historical significance of the 5 million documented names by focusing on the nature of the remaining undocumented names.
That's interesting. So you're saying reframe the 80% achievement by looking at how hard it is to find that last 20%.
Exactly.
But, won't focusing on the missing names kind of downplay the decades of work that went into the 5 million?
Not necessarily, no. I think it actually gives it more context. Right now, the emphasis is really heavy on the percentage, the completion rate. And that success framing, while it's true, it risks maybe minimizing the huge historical challenge in that remaining 20%. I mean, that missing group, it's a devastating statement about the sheer scale of the destruction itself, isn't it?
Right.
The victims whose lives were so utterly erased that maybe no record is left at all.
Ah, okay, I see. So we shift the narrative from look what we managed to do, to look what the perpetrators made almost impossible to track.
Precisely. That's it. The suggestion is to reframe it, to explicitly ask why these last names are so hard to find. Connect that challenge directly to the scope of the destruction, the deliberate wiping out of records. This shift really maximizes the significance and relevance angle. It defines the challenge ahead and gives crucial historical context to why documentation has limits.
Okay, makes sense. But how do we give a concrete example of that without, sounding too negative about the missing data?
Well, instead of just stating over 80% complete, maybe pivot to talk about the specific hurdles, like geographical challenges or demographic ones. Where are the gaps?
Right.
For instance, you could highlight the difficulty of tracing victims who were killed immediately, maybe in places that weren't recorded camps. Think about execution sites in Eastern Europe, forests, pits, places where records might never have been made or were intentionally destroyed right away.
Yeah, that specificity is key. Focusing on victims whose records were just gone, obliterated in certain areas.
Exactly.
That turns the missing names from just a number into proof of how hard it is, historically, to trace people who were meant to be erased.
It really does. It shifts the emphasis from a statistic to a very real historical barrier.
Okay.
It makes the story less about just a quantitative update and more reflection on historical erasure itself.
And that focus, I guess, naturally leads to the next question.
Yes, because the difficulty of getting that last 20% really highlights how important the method was for collecting the first 80%.
That's a good transition. Okay, let's talk about the methodology then. The material does mention the database includes, quote, testimonies, documents, and various sources, gathered globally over 7 decades.
Right. It mentions it, but, it feels a bit generic.
Especially for an audience that's probably interested in how this kind of long-term historical research actually works, its integrity. After 70 years, you kind of expect to hear more about the complexity, the sheer scale of it all. To fully engage an audience interested in the longevity and integrity of the database, the material must better articulate the diversity and scale of the sources used to achieve this 7-decade milestone. I agree. Saying testimonies, documents, and various sources, it's accurate, sure, but it does undersell the rigor involved in something this huge, this multi-generational.
Exactly. For the audience, that lack of detail might maybe unintentionally make the whole process seem less robust than it clearly was. It feels a bit abstract.
It does. If you've spent 70 years pulling together data from all over the world, cross-referencing, we need to feel the weight of that effort.
Okay. So the suggestion here is to give a more concrete picture, illustrate the scale, the different kinds of documentation, convey that methodological integrity, the international scope that's implied when you say collected from countries across the world. Show us the mechanism,
But is there a risk of getting too bogged down in methodology, like overwhelming a general reader with historical jargon?
Now, I don't think we need academic footnotes here, just high-level contrast. For example, the material could maybe specify the contrast between different source types.
Like what?
Well, like comparing the challenges of validating, say, fragile personal testimonies gathered right after the war.
Right, from survivors scattered everywhere.
Versus the completely different bureaucratic task of cross-referencing something like German transport documents or institutional records found much later, maybe from archives that only opened up after the Cold War.
That juxtaposition is powerful. It highlights the complexity. You're comparing, like, intimate, subjective memory with cold, hard paperwork.
And somehow weaving them together into one verified record. Yeah.
That's the challenge.
And we should probably anchor the timeline, too. Explicitly mention that 7 decades of work. Emphasize this isn't some short-term project. It's a sustained, multi-generational, institutional commitment. That kind of specificity, I think, transforms the database from just a list of names into, well, a testament to international historical work and dedication.
Yeah, that level of detail would resonate, I think, especially for people interested in how you maintain consistency and integrity and such a massive project over so much time across borders. It really shores up the strength of those 5 million entries.
Exactly. And building on that, once we've established the strength, the difficulty, the methodology, we have to talk about the purpose. Why was it all done?
And make the information accessible to the public. Standard goal for this kind of archive.
Absolutely the core goal. But the way it's put, it feels a little passive in the text, doesn't it? While celebrating the documentation and preservation of memory, the material could be strengthened by clearly outlining the practical, ongoing impact of having the database available for viewing on the Yad Vashem website.
I see the weakness there. Just saying it's available. Yeah, it is passive. It doesn't really explain how making it available actively fulfills that mission of remembrance and public benefit.
Right.
It needs to feel more active, like a tool people are actually using.
Exactly. The risk is it sounds like the huge effort just sort of ends once the data's online, which obviously isn't the case.
No.
So the suggestion is focus on the active uses, the intended outcomes of making it public. Frame the database not just as a static archive, but as a living tool for discovery, for education, for remembrance.
That aligns directly with making information accessible.
So, detailing who uses it and why. It matters to them today, right now. Not just saying, here's the link.
Precisely. Move from passive description to active verbs. Tangible results. Give some concrete examples of how specific groups use it.
Okay, like...
Well, for instance, detail its huge value for genealogical researchers, people looking for family history. That moment when someone finds confirmation about a lost relative.
Yeah, that's the emotional connection, isn't it?
It is.
It connects those 5 million names right back to individuals, to families living now. It really validates the whole 70 years of work.
Absolutely. And beyond just genealogy, show its function for, say, educators developing lesson plans, how high school students or university classes can use it to connect abstract history to real people, real identities. Or highlight how scholars are still using it for ongoing historical research, confirming identities, tracking movements, understanding the true scope.
Right. These examples show the immediate, tangible value. They demonstrate that documenting is just the first step. The database is a tool for the future, to actively engage with that memory.
Exactly. If the difference between saying the database is available and showing how it actively enables new understanding, new connection, new remembrance, that's huge.
Yeah.
By outlining these practical impacts, you kind of complete the narrative circle. You go from the immense difficulty of the task through the decades of careful work right to the ultimate goal, connecting every documented name to the public.
Okay, this has been really helpful. So just to recap the main opportunities for improvement. First, reframe the challenge of those undocumented names, that last 20%. Use it to define the scale of historical erasure and the ongoing research difficulty. Gives it a powerful anchor.
Right. Second, provide more detail on the sources, the variety, the robustness, that 7-decade international effort. Maybe contrast testimonies and institutional to really underscore the methodological rigor.
Got it. And finally, clarify the active, practical impact of it being online and accessible. Show, don't just tell, how it's a living tool for genealogists, educators, scholars, demonstrating the contemporary value of those 5 million names.
Exact. Look, the core material submitted is exceptionally strong. Really powerful. Making these kinds of narrative shifts will just maximize the impact. It'll show both the historical depth and the ongoing relevance of this incredibly important work. We definitely encourage you to make these adjustments.
Thank you for sending your work into the critique. We really look forward to seeing the revisions, and please do submit it back for another look once you've had a chance to work through these suggestions.